Hello, and welcome to the eighth installment of translating Julius Caesar's account of the Battle of Pharsalus in Book 3 of his Civil War. Today we're up to section 90. So, in the last two sections, Caesar has outlined his own and Pompey's dispositions for the battle at Pharsalus. We're now shifting the action back to Caesar's camp, and Caesar's going to recount the gist of the speech that he gave before his soldiers before they advanced into the battle itself. And so into the text we go. Executum cum militari more ad pugnam cohortaretur suaque in eum perpetui temporis officia predicaret, in primis commemoravit testibus se militibus uti posse, quanto studio pacem petisset. Okay, so you can see I've broken up the first sentence into two parts, just make it a little bit easier to translate the sense of it. We're starting the first sentence here with the main verb cohortaretur, which is an imperfect subjunctive, third person singular active. Caesar's the subject for this. The sense of it is to encourage or to give a speech. Basically to encourage in this context. It's just before the battle, he wants to get his soldiers fired up. And so encourage is what I've gone for here. Note too, the similarity to the word cohort, one of the divisions of a legion. I'm not 100% sure on the etymology of the word, but it seems that the word for encouragement is closely related to the 10th part of a legion. In any case, he has encouraged, and the direct object for the verb is executum, so that's army in the accusative singular. He encouraged the army. Note the main verb is in the subjunctive. That's because of the cum here, which in this case is a subordinating conjunction. It's introducing a temporal clause. So we're starting off with when he was encouraging the army. Ad pugnam, so preposition ad with the accusative singular pugnam, for the battle, in this case, for the fight, literally, but for the battle, or for battle. And he's doing so, we've got this ablative here, kind of acting somewhat adverbially. So more in the ablative singular from mos, a custom or a fashion, a way of doing things. And that's qualified by militari, the adjective like military. And so Caesar, when he was encouraging the army for battle, as you might expect, in the military fashion or according to military custom. And moving on, we've got the connective conjunction que here on the end of sua. So that's the possessive adjective going with officia. I'll get to that in a minute or less. Predicaret is the main verb here. Again, in the subjunctive, imperfect tense, third person singular active. So Caesar, again, being the subject for this verb. You can kind of see the compound of pry and dicere, to speak before, which is kind of what Caesar's doing. He's speaking before the battle. Here, something like he declared. So when he was encouraging the army for battle according to military custom, and he declared, and that's where sua officia comes into it. So officia is the noun in the neuter accusative plural, like obligations in this case, and sua the third person possessive adjective agreeing with officia. So his obligations, going back to Caesar, in eum, preposition in with the accusative singular of the demonstrative adjective, used more like a pronoun here, to it. And that's qualified by perpetui temporis, which is a genitive of description. So very much a kind of adjectival genitive. Perpetui is the genitive singular. That's an adjective here qualifying temporis. So in the singular, temporis meaning time, perpetui, like perpetual in English, in the sense of ongoing. And that is really what this phrase means. It's just adjectival, ongoing, or continuous, qualifying sua officia. So Caesar has declared his ongoing obligations to it. So eum, going back to executum, and another main verb, this time indicative, in perfect tense, third person singular active. Caesar's the subject for this one as well. Commemoravit, English commemorate is related to this word in the sense he recalled. So he recalled, and that's going to introduce an accusative and infinitive and sort of govern indirect speech for quite a while. Actually, it's going to move on into the next sentence as well. So he recalled in primis, so preposition in with the ablative plural, primus rather, from prior, so it's the superlative. Like English in the first instance, something like that. He declared in the first instance, or he recalled in the first instance, that, and we're going to move into accusative and infinitive. Say, so reflexive pronoun in the accusative, he himself, with the infinitive posse, so that's the present infinitive of the verb to be able. So he himself would be able, uti, another infinitive, to use, to make use of, and that's going to take an ablative as its object, which we have here, militibus, soldiers, in the ablative plural, and we've got a kind of predicate construction. So he would be able to use the soldiers' testibus as witnesses. Testibus, like testimony in English. So he would be able to use the soldiers as witnesses in the first instance, or the soldiers could bear witness. That's to sort of change a little bit of the sense of it, but it's a bit more natural in English. Either way, he recalled that he could, in the first instance, use the soldiers as witnesses, or have the soldiers bear witness to the fact that. And we're moving back into the subjunctive, indirect speech. Petisset. So pluperfect tense this time, so referring to time prior to his making the speech. Pluperfect subjunctive, third person singular active, Caesar, our subject again. Petisset, like petition, he had sought. And what he had sought is peace in the accusative singular here. So pax pacem being the accusative singular. He had sought peace, but qualified here, again, another ablative acting kind of adverbially. Quanto studio. So quanto, like quantum, the manner in which he's sought peace is indicated here. It's kind of an ablative manner. How much, or with how much studio, like English studiousness, to study, to sort of apply yourself, to focus on something. So with what application, with what focus, with what zeal he had sought peace. So Caesar's calling his soldiers to say, look, in the first instance, you can all bear witness to the zeal with which I had sought peace. That's basically what Caesar's saying to his soldiers here. And so, by way of translation here, when he encouraged the army for battle according to military custom and declared his ongoing obligations to it, he recalled that in the first instance he could have the soldiers bear witness to how zealously he had sought peace. So fairly straightforward. I've translated zealously for Quanto Studio. As I said, it's sort of adverbial, so an adverb kind of works in modern English just for a more straightforward translation. So how zealously, rather, for Quanto Studio. And he could have the soldiers bear witness. It's not quite literal, captures the sense in a more natural way in modern English, though, rather than saying he could use the soldiers as witnesses. But there we are. So that's the first part of that first sentence. And moving on to the second part, Caesar's now going to strengthen his argument with examples. And these are examples which can be found in the earlier sections of Book 3 of the Civil War. Here we go. Quae per Vitinium in colloquis, quae per alum Clodium cum Scipione agisset, quibus modis ad oricum cum libone de mitendis legatis condendisset. Okay, so we've got a string of relative clauses here. So quae appearing twice, that's in the feminine nominative singular, going back to pacem. So it's the piece, which is the subject for this verb here, egisset. So it's in the pluperfect subjunctive, third person singular active. Meaning had been lacking or had been wanting, in the sense we say in English, someone had been found wanting. For example, they're lacking a certain quality in a certain situation. That's what Caesar means here, which had been lacking or which had been wanting. And from that, the verb can also mean, as it does in English, actually, the same word used, to want something, as in to desire it, precisely because it is lacking. And that comes across into modern English as well. When we say we want something, we are in want of it as well. In any case, so quae egiset, so which had been wanting or had been lacking, and that is going to have an ablative object here in colloquis. So preposition in with colloquis. You can kind of see like English loquacious, loquacity, so talking, and with the sort of compound with what would normally be cum transformed here, colloquis, so in discussions. And these discussions were attempted to be made per vitinium. So preposition per, like in English, like through, with the accusative singular. Vitinium is the accusative singular of Vitinius, proper noun. So Vitinius is one of Caesar's subordinate officers. So had been wanting or lacking in the discussions through Vitinius, and had been wanting or lacking again, so which had been wanting or lacking, cum Scipione, so cum in this case a preposition with the ablative singular of Scipio, so Scipione, with Scipio per alum Clodium, so preposition per again with the accusative singular of the proper nouns. Aulus Clodius is our person here. So two attempts by Caesar through Vatinius in discussions or meetings, through Aulus Clodius with Scipio, and quibus modis, ablative plural here, modis from modus, meaning a mode or a manner, and quibus, relative pronoun, agreeing with modus here, by which means contendisset. So English contend is fairly clear from that. That's another pluperfect subjunctive. Caesar is the subject for this verb, third person singular active. He had struggled, striven, and so by which means he had striven or struggled, like in English, struggle with someone or something, and in this case it's cum libone, so preposition cum with the ablative singular of another proper noun, in this case libo. ablative singular libone. So by which means he had struggled with libo. Uh, yeah, we'll do this part first. De mittendis legatis. So preposition de with the ablative plural legatus is the noun here, like legate. So representative, emissary, ambassador, in the plural though, so ambassadors. And we've got the gerundive agreeing with legatus here for the sending, or with regards to the sending of ambassadors. And this has taken place ad oricum. So preposition ad with the accusative singular, this time the name of a town, which is conveniently oricum in the nominative as well, and oricum in the accusative singular. So by which means he had contended with Libo with regards to the sending of ambassadors or emissaries, representatives at oricum. Or you could even say to oricum in that case. But there we have it. There are Caesar's three examples that he's provided. That sort of power of three argumentation. Caesar's decided to apply it here. And going on with the translation, this wraps up the first sentence. Which had been wanting in the parley through Vatinius. That's another word, actually, parley for colloquies. Which had been wanting in the parley through Vatinius and through Aulus Clodius with Scipio. How he had struggled with Libo for the sending of emissaries at Oricum. So, with at Oricum, that's in Caesar's account of things, that's where his discussions with Libo regarding the sending of ambassadors or emissaries took place. So this was fairly early on in the campaign around Dyrrachium, sort of on the west coast of what is now Albania. Caesar, with varying levels of success, was attempting to ship troops and supplies over, so especially food supplies, because he was having a lot of trouble, as was alluded to in some earlier sections that we've covered, having a lot of trouble securing the food supply. And so he was trying to ship over both troops and food supplies from Italy over to the west coast of Albania, to sort of where he was based. Pompey's navy, under the command of Libo and also Calpurnius Bibulus, varied success in cutting Caesar off. They'd made life very difficult for Caesar. Out of the 12 legions that he wanted to get over, he only ended up with the equivalent of 8, and 8 very understrength legions at that, amounting to 21,000 legionaries, which is nowhere near the full strength of roughly 5,000 soldiers and 8 legions, roughly about half strength. So Pompey's navy had been fairly successful in certainly restricting the quantity of material that could be shipped over from Italy. The context of the parley is that even like modern navies today, it was basically an issue of resupply for the Pompey's navy. They'd run extremely short of fresh water, and Caesar's forces had successfully cut them off from any friendly ports. And so the parley was to agree to a sort of local truce so that the fleet could acquire water supplies and food supplies and so on, and not, perish at sea, which nobody really wanted. That's a pretty bad way to go, even if it is your enemy. So there was a local truce there, agreed to by Caesar's deputies at Oricum and Libo and Bibulus. Caesar himself decided to try and expand the truce into a more general peace, and so he was entering into discussions with Libo. Libo had kind of agreed in principle that he would make representations to Pompey, but he wouldn't agree to the sending of ambassadors, as Caesar describes here. And as a result, Caesar begins to suspect that Libo is perhaps just spinning out the time, uh, as during these talks with Caesar, hostilities had ceased. And so Caesar begins to suspect that Libo is just trying to gain as much advantage for his own side as he can without any genuine intention of securing a peace. And so Caesar breaks off talks. So that's what happened at Oricum. Just prior to this, no, just after, rather, were the talks with Vatinius. So this was in the context that Caesar's army and Pompey's army were camped fairly near to each other, fairly early on in the campaign. During some of the sort of works that were going on, I think this is around Dyrrhachium. I might be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure this is around Dyrrhachium, though. There was a bit of fraternization between the soldiers of both Caesar and Pompey, and the soldiers had managed to organize to have representatives from both Pompey's side and Caesar's side attend a parley. And so Vatinius represented Caesar's side, and a certain Terentius Varro represented Pompey's side. And there were discussions between the two of them. It seemed to be going pretty well. Varro had agreed to basically think over on what Vatinius was saying and come back the next day, until they were rather rudely and dramatically interrupted by Titus Labienus, who we met a few sections ago, who fairly emphatically shut the whole thing down. His precise words, according to Caesar, just to take a fairly representative quote, was in Latin, Nam nobis nisi Caesaris capite relato pax esse nulla potest, which, to give a very rough and ready translation, for us, unless Caesar's head has been handed over, no peace is possible. So Labienus was fairly emphatic that there was going to be no peace without Caesar himself being out of the picture rather permanently. And finally, just to provide a bit of context for Aulus Clodius with Scipio, so this is after the first battle. So there were multiple battles, as Caesar has alluded to. There have been multiple battles at Dyrrhachium. The second one, Pompey won, achieved victory. And so that's when Caesar had decided to bail out of the region. The first battle, though, went in Caesar's favor. And Pompey lost something like 2,000 soldiers. In Caesar's own account, he believes the war could have been ended then and there had his subordinate Publius Sulla, who we met a few sections ago, had Sulla pursued the fleeing Pompeians. Caesar believes the war could have been wrapped up then and there, but in Caesar's absence, in his personal absence, Sulla decided to hold back his own troops from the pursuit, and so potentially lost the chance to win the whole war. That's very much debatable, though. In any case, it was a reverse for Pompey. And so from this position of strength, Caesar has decided to send an emissary to Metellus Scipio, who we met in the first section. He's Pompey's father-in-law. At this time, Scipio hasn't joined up with Pompey's forces yet. He's on his way over from Syria. And by this point, he's in what is now the Greek region of Macedonia. And so Caesar decides to send an emissary, Aulus Clodius, to Scipio to discuss peace terms from this position of relative advantage. Pompey's just suffered a defeat. And so Caesar wants to sort of convince Scipio, especially as Pompey's father-in-law, to a more general peace. This seems to be going well, but again, things kind of fall apart when one of Scipio's senior staff, certain Marcus Favonius, berates him for agreeing to any kind of terms. So that also falls apart. And so we reach the situation that we're in now, where Caesar and Pompey face off in Thessaly. Okay, so that's just to provide a little bit of context for what Caesar's talking about here. When he provides this list of examples, these are the things that he's talking about. And these are all from Caesar's own account of the Civil War, so they're all in earlier sections of Book 3 of the Civil War in particular. Okay, and there we go. On to the next sentence. Neque se unquam abuti militum sanguine neque rem publicam alter utro exequitu privare voluisse. Okay, so as I said earlier, the verb commemoravit is introducing indirect speech on into this sentence as well. And so the main verb here, voluisse, is a perfect infinitive, perfect active infinitive of the verb to wish or to want for something, like English volition, voluntary, and so on. And so the main verb is in the perfect infinitive. And so he had wished, but that's negated by neque and neque. So we've got a kind of, because of the repetition, we've got it's like English neither nor. So there's neither and then one idea, nor next idea. Dependent on voluisse though. So he had neither wished, and that's going to itself introduce another accusative and infinitive. So Caesar's kind of layered like a cake, these accusative and infinitive indirect speech clauses and sentences. He had neither wished, and we've got the reflexive pronoun in the accusative here, se. So he had neither wished himself, umquam. So we've got an adverb here. This just means ever. So he himself, you could even say he himself had neither wished, or had never wished, even with neque. Abuti, so that's our infinitive. Abuti, so it's a kind of compound verb. Like the preposition away from. And so with uti, in the English sense of to throw away something or to make ill use of it, that is what Caesar means here. So it never wished even to throw away, and like uti, it's going to take an ablative object, and that's sanguine here, blood in the ablative singular with a possessive genitive, militum, of the soldiers. So he had never wished, you might say, to throw away the blood of the soldiers or to waste the blood of the soldiers. Neque nor, and we've got another present infinitive in this case. So abuti is a present infinitive active, as is privare here, like English privation, and from that, like deprivation, deprive. That's more the sense of what privare means here. He had neither wished for that, nor to deprive, to take away, rem publicam. So really it's deprive because it's going to take a direct object. He's going to deprive someone or something in this case of something. And so he had never wished to deprive rem publicam, the republic in the accusative singular. So there it is there. It's two words, which obviously has been compounded into one in more modern times, but both go in the accusative feminine singular. So rem is actually the noun for that, and publicam is an adjective agreeing with rem. But he had never wished to deprive the republic. And we've got in the ablative, it's a sort of proper ablative of separation because of the verb privare. And it's to deprive of an army, so ablative singular, exequitu, army, and that's qualified by ultra outro, which is it's a pronoun, it's a compound of alter and outro, or rather outer. Alter like alter ego, like other, and outer refers to one of a pair of things. So the other of the two literally is something like what that pronoun means. In this case, though, just either. So he had neither wished to throw away the blood of the soldiers, or he had neither ever wished to throw away the blood of the soldiers, nor to deprive the Republic of either army. And that's basically what I've got here. He himself had neither wished to waste the blood of the soldiers, nor to deprive the Republic of either army. We might say had never, because we've got that sort of negation with umquam. It's probably better to say never. I'm going to go with never there, actually. Changing my mind about that. And there we are. So that's the gist of Caesar's speech. Getting his army sort of fired up. It's a very self-righteous kind of speech, though. It is really trying to get his soldiers fired up in the rightness of their cause. It's not so much let's go out and like kill a bunch of people. It's we're on the right side, that right side of history here so often in more modern political parlance. That sort of sense. Like we're on the right side of things here. We're sort of acting in accordance, especially in ancient times too. It's more in accordance with the sort of divine structure and logic of how the universe is supposed to work. That's kind of what Caesar wants his soldiers to feel here. And naturally, he wants his audience to also feel somewhat the same way that Caesar was probably in the right here. Look at how often and how zealously he sought peace in these earlier examples. And to an extent, it works. Um, the reception of Caesar is very mixed. There's definitely a lot of scholars out there, even into these very modern times, that take a positive view of Caesar overall, regardless of what it is that he had done. And so, to a certain extent, the Caesarian propaganda, if you want to call it that, seems to have worked. But in their defense, it's generally considered that Caesar was legitimate in these attempts uh, to achieve peace. So there's also that. In any case, moving on to the very last sentence of this section. Hac habita oratione exposgentibus militibus et studio pugnae ad dentibus tuba signum dedit. Okay, so hac is a conjunction thereupon. Yeah, thereupon, and then. And we've got an ablative absolute. Caesar finally managed to get one in there. Habita oratione, so we've got the perfect participle of habere here in the feminine ablative singular, agreeing with oratione, like oration, speech. The sense of it is this speech having been given. And our main verb here is dedit. This is in the indicative, so we've sort of moved out of indirect speech now. This is no longer dependent on Caesar recalling things to his soldiers. Dedit, so perfect tense, third person singular active, of dare, like to give, and so he gave, and he gave the signal. So signum, accusative singular, fairly straightforward. He did so ablative singular. He did so with, by means of, tuba, a trumpet. So he sounded the signal really, or he sounded what I think is the advance in this case, and that's how I've translated it. Literally, he gave the signal, pardon me, with a trumpet. And this is where it gets a little bit ambiguous. Either he gave the signal to or for ex poscentibus militibus, which is the soldiers, either in the dative or ablative plural, qualified by the participle ex poscentibus, which is also dative or ablative plural, agreeing with soldiers. Ex poscentibus means shouting or clamoring. So the soldiers are really fired up, which is kind of the point of Caesar's speech. So they're all sort of shouting and clanging their arms on their shields and giving war cries and so on. The reason it's a bit ambiguous is that you can, as it is in English, the verb for giving uh, can function transitively and intransitively. So you can have a direct object, as it is here. He gave the signal, but you also can have a direct object for giving. Like you give something, which would be a direct object, give a present to someone, and that someone is the direct object. That could be what's going on here. So he gave the signal to the shouting or clamoring soldiers, or it could be another ablative absolute. And the kind of feel of the sentence would then change because Caesar's almost just listing things that are happening. It would be the speech having been given, uh, the soldiers shouting or clamoring, and a fire, ardentibus, like English ardent, to be ardent about something or someone, to love ardently. So to be sort of on fire with feeling. That's what is meant here. Ablative plural, again, going back to the soldiers. Another participle, this one. So he could be giving it to the clamoring soldiers, or to the soldiers clamoring and a fire in. And then we've got an ablative studio, so that's our ablative singular again. We met studio a bit earlier. Zeal in this case is probably the best translation. Hugnai, which is the dative singular form. Hugnam is the accusative singular. So again, for the fight or for the battle. So they're shouting and a fire in their zeal for battle. So that's one possibility, is that these are all datives, but another possibility is that they're ablatives, and it's just a kind of ablative absolute construction. When I looked up Kennedy, his commentary on Book 3, he also expresses similar sentiments that it could be one or the other. There's no definite answer that he's arrived at. I haven't quite arrived at a definite answer either. Either one can work in this context. And the forms, the dative and ablative plural, because they're exactly the same, and the sentence means that it can work for either one. Kind of free in this case to choose which path you want to take. So either he gave the signal to the soldiers, so probably that dative sense. He gave signal to the soldiers, clamoring and a fire in their zeal for battle. So you might supply their the possessive pronoun in English. Or you've kind of got a list of things. Having given this speech, uh, the soldiers being, or the soldiers clamoring and a fire in their zeal for battle. Either one. In any case, yeah, I've gone for the dative sense here, or a little bit of a mix actually. In any case, having made this speech, he sounded the advanced, the clamouring soldiers, a fire in their zeal for battle. And that's section 90. So Caesar wraps up here just with a speech justifying his own position, getting his soldiers all fired up in the rightness of their cause, and justifying himself to posterity as well, to his audience, both in his own time and for all time as well. Trying to show that really he didn't want the battle, that he had sought peace, and that seems to be fair enough, at least based on what we can verify from his own account. It seems like he did legitimately seek to end the conflict before there was any major battle, and he avoided bloodshed. For someone of his own time, he made an effort to avoid bloodshed as far as possible. So that's fair enough. But it does, when I went through this, it reminded me of a part of Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, where Justinian launches the reconquest of Africa. And it's the sort of prelude to Belisarius leaving Constantinople and sailing over. And Gibbon makes one of those remarks, which he's quite famous for, I guess, in his sort of vigorous, sometimes ironic English. Um, I'll just read it out here because it reminded me of this quote. And the war was preceded, according to the practice of civilized nations, by the most solemn protestations that each party was sincerely desirous of peace. So Gibbon being fairly devastating in his critique of the humanity there, and that's kind of what this whole section made me think of. There's an element of that here as well. That certainly every nation that calls itself civilized feels the need to justify itself in whichever war it enters, that it is sincerely desirous of peace, and that every military action that it carries out is somehow in the interests of peace. And there we are for section 90. So hopefully that was relatively interesting and enjoyable and somewhat educational, I guess. As I always emphasize, this is just my translation. It's not definitive and most definitely not the only translation of Caesar's Civil War. There must be hundreds, if not thousands of them by now. So do go and pick out one or more. Definitely compare them, actually. You'll find Penguin translations tend to capture more the sense of what he's saying. The Lerb editions go a little bit more literal, without being too literal. They're still quite enjoyable to read in modern English, but um, tend to be a little bit more literal in their translation. Penguin stretches things out a little bit. The translators for Penguin tend to stretch things out. Anyway, that is all for section 90. I will have section 91 ready when I have section 91 ready. So thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, take care, and toodle pip.